Hey friend, welcome to day 5 of our watercolor tip a day series for World Watercolor Month. Today we are covering water control, one of the most important skills in watercolor. If your results feel patchy or unpredictable, it might be the water and not you, so let's fix that. Alright, so before we get into the actual drill, I want to show you what doesn't work when mixing paint. So right now I'm adding way too much water on purpose to my palette, so there's a huge puddle sitting there. And when I try to pick this up, it's mostly water with some pigment. And then I'm trying to add more pigment to compensate that. So I'm adding too much pigment. And then it's hard to control. It doesn't really stick well to the paper. And what this is going to do when it dries is it's going to create these unpredictable blooms or streaks or uneven drying, which it will look cool, but it isn't really exactly what it's supposed to be. So if we do the opposite, we're going to dry our brush completely, and I'm going to pick in some paint, putting a little paint on there, and now I have too little paint. So I'm barely adding any water, and now I have this very streaky dry brush effect, which also has its place. But it's thick, sticky, and when I try to paint with it, the strokes are going to feel draggy and dry. It skips across the paper, it looks patchy, almost like chalky. Since it's not fluid, you're not going to get the colors to lay down evenly. So these are both really common mistakes, and the only way to get better at this is to practice finding that balance. There's no magic button, and you don't stink at watercolor because you can't get it right away at the first try. It really takes time, it takes practice, it takes muscle memory. You're good, you're fine, keep going. So the goal here is to get just enough water so your brush feels smooth and your paint flows evenly. So I'm mixing up what I find to be a good amount of water, and that's the key to keep building up soft and consistent layers. And once you have that down, then that's what's going to unlock so many techniques like wet into wet or smooth gradients, which I'm also going to show you in future lessons. But to help with this, we're going to be doing a drill that you may have heard of. It's called the tea to butter drill, and it's one of the best exercises that you can do to learn water control. I'm starting with a clean mixing area. That way I can see what I'm working with. I want to be able to see how much paint I'm adding, how much water I'm mixing in, and how it all looks before it hits the paper. So first up we have tea. Tea is going to be the most diluted. It's mostly water with just a little pigment, and it's going to go on super light and transparent where you can definitely see the paper through it. And there's not going to be a perfect amount of times you go back and forth between dipping how much paint you want in there. There is no right number, or perfect ratio, in my opinion. So this is just showing the opacity of the paint. So if you think about tea, it's still going to have a slight color to it, and you're still going to be able to see to the bottom of that mug. And you could even add more water to this. I think there's infinite amounts of water to paint ratios where it's almost translucent. But the whole point of this drill is to learn how to control water. And you'll use this wash for gentle shadows, like very soft skies, glazing, or any place that you really want a very subtle wash. Next we have coffee. Coffee is a little darker than tea, but it's still transparent. So you're still going to be able to see the paper through it. So I'm just swatching this on here, and you can see there, you're still seeing that white of that paper, but I'm going to lift it a little bit and just make sure that I have the right color. But again, this isn't exactly about the color, it's about the opacity. So you can see as we swatch this, it is just becoming and feeling a little bit more substantial than tea. And of course, yes, it's darker. This layer will be good for your gentle mid-tones or sort of building up color gradually. Next up we have milk. So milk is still fluid and it's easy to work with, but now there's a little bit of a noticeable boost in color. So now we're on to milk, and not quite sure if it's milk as in just milk or coffee with milk or tea with milk. But the point is that it's still fluid and it's easy to work with, but now with a noticeable boost in color. So you'll still see the paper underneath, but it starts to feel again like more substantial. We'll use this mix for washes, petals if you paint flowers, skies, or areas where you want a soft and even color. So I'm going to call this coffee with milk, just because it's clarifying for me. Okay, next up we've got cream. So cream has even more pigment and a lot less water. So I'm really loading up that pigment in my brush, and this is going to be a little bit more opaque, like mostly opaque actually. It's going to start to feel a lot heavier on the page. So I'm just mixing up what I think is a good mixture to get that opacity level to be basically opaque. So this isn't going to show through as much, and the color looks a lot richer. This layer is going to be great for adding depth, shadow, building up midtones, adding in your details. So here we have cream. And this is just before our last one, which is butter. So butter is straight from the pan or tube, basically. So I have very little water, but of course you need water to activate the paint. So you're going to be using water, but mostly the littlest amount you can grab. So just a touch. So this is going to be thick, opaque. It does not flow much. It might be a little harder to work with. You're not going to see the paper through at all. This is great for dry brushing, bold details, again, those finishing touches, but just be careful because if your brush is too dry, it'll scratch or skip. So there we have butter. So let's practice some more drills. We have a tea to butter gradient, or you could do the opposite, butter to tea. Let's just do both. So we're going to start with a row, and we're going to go from tea to butter. You can do this in little sort of rectangular segments. So I'm going to start with the lightest that I can get, and I could definitely go a little lighter than that. So I'm lifting that up, and then I'm just sort of dragging that. And as I go down the line, I'm just going to keep adding more paint and just darkening it up. So we're making a gradient. So I'm just going to go in and a little bit more paint until we get to the last opacity level. So you can do this again. I feel like this could be infinite. You could go on and on and on. But this is just a really great way to practice water control. Believe it or not, this is how you do it. You just got to practice gradients. There's other drills. We'll do one more after this. But this is really going to help you so much with learning how to control the water by controlling the opacity level. So I'm just going to keep on going, and I think in the front here I could sort of blend this and make this a little bit lighter. We're not going for perfection here. And not to be redundant, but the more water in your paint, the more the paper shows through. The lighter your color, the less water, the more intense and opaque it gets. But then you're going to lose flow. Okay, now let's do it the opposite way, where we're going to start with butter. So just a touch of paint on that brush, go into that color, and then we've got that thick, opaque, rich color where you cannot see the paper through. Yes, you can still see the texture. But you see how as I sort of lift and add more water in, you can do it right on the page too. You can add more water right on the page. You don't have to mix, because we're just dragging that water out. This is awesome drill for control. See how I'm just going in, tapping. I'm not really swirling. I'm just tapping it off, blotting it, and then pulling it. And this is so great for practicing. And again, you can go until you can see just a barely light pink, or whatever color you're using. All right, for our last drill, we're gonna paint some circles or shapes, whatever you decide to do. So I'm gonna paint overlapping circles, and I'm gonna start with just this very light wash, and this is just dirty water, to be honest. You can do a full-on color, whatever you prefer, but I'm starting with a light wash, and then I'm gonna slowly sort of just add color into that and just drop in color. And this is a great technique for wet on wet control, which we will be going in further into, but this is also a great way to learn about water control. So we're just dropping pigment and we're watching how it spreads. I added another pigment in. Of course, the camera got a little blurry there, but we're watching how it spreads. And we're gonna try it again after this with either a little bit less water on the page or a drier brush. But you can see here how the pigment behaves. So this is a great drill to do. Just practice painting circles, practice touching, practice lifting the water up to have control of that water. So you see how it lifts, and you can see how the paint and the water behaves. and you can practice blotting. So if you have too much water, you can always blot it, or you can always lift it with a dry brush, which is another technique. But yeah, this is just a great way to continue to just observe how the paint and the water react together. Just a really great drill. Now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to grab a solid color here, and I'm going to paint another circle. And this is more like a wet onto dry. I'm just laying that flat color down so I have an even color in my circle. And I don't want there to be any puddles, so this is where I'm controlling that water. I'm going to add some more color into that. So I'm going to do another circle right next to it and let those circles overlap and touch. And then I'm just going to let them bleed into one another, and then they'll start to blend. And you could try this with less water, you can add more water, and you can just see how they react. So I'm adding another color here, and you can see where the pink and that yellowy color blended together. And then I'm using some red there, and it's just a little bit puddly, but I'm moving it around. And this is how you learn how to control the water. And it's also really fun. And I just love, one of my most favorite things about watercolor are those blooms, those bleeds, those blends. So dropping in different colors, it's also a great way to practice color theory. And we're going to do some color mixing in our next lesson. But yeah, you can keep going here, watch how they dry. And here's a little bit of an up close. So this is like almost like a coffee, I would say, a layer, coffee or coffee with milk. And then we're adding in some cream into there, and then you're watching how they interact with each other. So while you're doing this drill, you're also picking up those different opacities and playing with them. And you see, okay, I put a little bit too much water in there. Look at how it's spreading really fast and too quickly. And again, this might be a granulating paint, so it's a little bit different material in this paint than another paint. But yeah, it all goes together. And then I'm using what I put down because I put down too much, and I'm spreading it out. And then we're creating almost like, again, a coffee or coffee with milk layer. It's also just fun. It's a low pressure way to experiment and try different consistencies with different pigments and watch how they interact. So to wrap this up, water control is not something that you're going to master in one session. It's something that you build through repetition and observation. Today we take one page and dedicate it to this. Play with tea, coffee, milk, cream, butter. Try wet on wet. Try circles. Just notice how the paint behaves. This one drill will make such a difference, especially when we get into color mixing tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next lesson, and I will see you tomorrow.